be here today. Thanks for coming to this session. So I am Sarah Haynes. I am an assistant professor at the University of Toronto in civil and mineral engineering. And a lot of the work I do is in housing. So today we're going to be talking about our From Harvest to House initiative and workshop, which we've been working on with communities in Saskatchewan, so about 6 communities, and how we're moving forward with our housing initiative here. So I'm on the screen. So I'm gonna pass it over to Natalie to begin.
Yes, I have to remember to speak into the mic because Joe is going to get mad at me. We had this conversation first. I have ADHD, so keeping me in one spot is really hard to do. So I'd like to acknowledge, my name is Natalie Kleik. I am a Saulteaux Assiniboine woman from White Bear First Nations, and I live in Prince Albert. My family is also from Truro, Nova Scotia. My grandfather is a beautiful African Nova Scotian. So to have the opportunity today to be here, we respectfully want to acknowledge that we are on the lands with which gathering here today, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Nation and the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nations, the signatory of the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. So I'd like to welcome everybody here today for this gathering.
So today, again, we're going to talk about kind of our story, how Natalie and I came together, how this project started, go through some storytelling lived experiences in a workshop that we had, some rich pictures, it was more drawing. We're going to share all that with you, and then some of our next steps. So who are we? Would you like to go ahead?
Absolutely. So my name is Natalie Kleik. I am the founder and CEO and innovator for a building material called magnesium oxide and a company called Rocktree MGO. So the project that I'm currently working on is actually to change the way that we build houses by an all-female led team to introduce the first production facility for a product called magnesium oxide board. So this has been something that I've been working on for some time. So within our team, we have myself, Natalie Kleik. We have Dr. Sarah Haynes, who is responsible for civil engineering at the University of Toronto. And we also had another part of our team, which was Dr. Helen Stops. Unfortunately, she was unable to get her flight here today, so we have to apologize due to the flight systems. Now, in terms of a little bit more about myself, there we go. So how did we get here? So a little bit about my history. I grew up primarily in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, with a combination of growing up in Nova Scotia. When I graduated, was in university, I was recruited by Service Canada to participate in the intake of the Common Experience Payment. And the Common Experience Payment, of course, was the acknowledgement of survivors' experiences at residential schools across Canada. Service Canada was not prepared, I believe, for this intake in terms of actually the emotional impacts it was going to have on the staff that was going to be listening to these experiences. So through the time that I was with Service Canada, I listened to and experienced and documented a little over 300 residential school survivors' experiences. Now, within those individual survivors' experiences, had the opportunity of me traveling into communities, into their homes, into their lived experiences, and actually seeing what their homes are from community to community looked like. So a lot of the times when you'd walk into their home, oh, don't take your shoes off. You'd have to see past what their housing situation was to actually get to the root of where we were in terms of understanding the independent assessment process that further followed the Common Experience Payment. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was actually creating digital technology programming, and we got shut down. And the next thing that really grew from there was actually food security. In Prince Albert, we have about 160 homeless that live on our streets, and we're going to be facing the pandemic without any food security. So in March of 2020, I created the Community Cares Kitchen with my daughter, Mingela, for her 14th birthday. And over the 3 years, we actually evolved with funding through COVID and the Reaching Homes initiative. We were able to move from the Community Cares Kitchen, which was a completely volunteer dollar funded kitchen at the beginning of the pandemic, and move to our Food on the Move project, which is actually 11 schools, all donations, and we started feeding our students at the schools in Prince Albert at the beginning of the pandemic. We moved on into what was going to be our stability plan with the Prince Albert Grand Council and addressing the pandemic needs for our homeless and vulnerable. And at this point, we were seeing what would houselessness looked like in terms of how the pandemic was affecting our communities and those that were unhoused and now calling our streets in Prince Albert home. So when we were tying in what was happening as a result of the pandemic, we saw, of course, the increase of homeless population in Prince Albert double within a 1-year period. So when I started, we had about 70 that were living on the street. By the following year, we were up to 135. And it was just this rapid succession of unhoused. So over the 3 years that we were open, we also developed a outreach van that we ran through the winter time. And that was from 6 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were really connecting with our homeless and our vulnerable to get them to sources of heat, shelter, even to the police station in order for them to be able to have bed for that night. And that was a part of our initiative during the first 3 years of the pandemic, was to facilitate the support of our homeless, our housed, and our elders. Now, in June of this year, after 3 years, and we tried to secure proper funding for Prince Albert through the Prince Albert Grand Council, our Moose Lodge Wellness Center, we provided meals daily through the pandemic over the 3 years. And we were just a little under 500,000 meals over the 3 years as we were serving our homeless and vulnerable. We were unable to secure funding to continue on, which is what brought us to the Moose Lodge Wellness Center. Now, over this time, a little bit of history from the Common Experience Payment. I've been trying to figure out a solution for mold for a little over 26 years. And this came from my lived experiences of a friend that had a photo album that was from front to back, a depiction of mold that was from floor to ceiling in her home community of Chittick Lake First Nations in Saskatchewan. And at that point growing up, I hadn't ever seen mold metabolize in the way that it did in these pictures. And it impacted me at 19. I'm 45. It has taken me 26 years to figure out how to solution mold through introducing a new building material to Canada. This building material has been used in Canada since maybe 2006, but there is no Canadian manufacturing facility. So we're actually working on being the first female-led, female-owned, Indigenous-led production facility for magnesium oxide board. So it's important as we're talking about housing as we're moving forward. So through the From Harvest to House gatherings that we've been organizing and the consultations within our communities within the Prince Albert Grand Council, Treaty 6, Treaty 10, Treaty 8 territories, we've had this opportunity through the work through the Community Cares Kitchen, which was to dialogue with our communities and have real conversations from actually, if anything, from a bottom-up approach. It's so much easier to understand the actual impacts of a community from the individual that was living in those lived experiences, the housing managers, the counselors, the new counselors, and being able to have those conversations on a grassroots level. From there, over this past year, of 187 applications through the Northern Access, through Canadian Construct, or through the CMHC and Impact Canada, our project actually received incubation funding. Out of the 187, only 30 moved forward, and we're just actually in the final stages of the development of our project. However, through these dialogues, we wanted to ensure that to harness the conversation from the point of view of shut up and listen. I kept on telling my team, we need to shut up and listen. We need to listen to our community members in order for us to actually develop any type of solution moving forward. We need to listen. So that was where we connected through the forums, through Service Canada, or through CMHC and Impact Canada, where I was able to connect with Helen and with Sarah. So with Sarah, she's going to explain a little bit more about her vast experience and her knowledge through mold. And
yeah. So Natalie and I met, as she said, through CMHC, and it has been over I guess almost like 2 years almost, working together on housing and First Nations housing specifically. So just a little background on the work that I do. So I am in civil engineering, but a lot of the work I do is in indoor air quality and so mold. And I know that's something that probably a lot of you have seen and talked to others about, right? It's a critical issue. So with my work and my research on that side of things for me is looking at bacteria, fungi, viruses, how do they move in our indoor environments, but then also what are alternative building materials? What can we use in our housing? How are we, structuring this? And is there affordable tests that we can use to look for mold? We're working to try to develop easy testing equipment for mold and finding it in houses as well. And so some of that and thinking about ventilation systems. So that's really more of the work that I do day to day at the university. But my real passion is really this and finding, these challenges and coming up with solutions and working directly with the community to really co-develop solutions. So where this started, right? Natalie and I connected, and we know, and you've probably seen these statistics, that there's a deficit of 130,000 homes in Canada by 2031, which unfortunately isn't that far away. So initially, Natalie and I had connected with Helen as well, and we were thinking about, okay, I work in mold. I'm looking at different building materials. I'm in civil engineering. Maybe there's something else we could use. And I know other people have looked into this for so long, but maybe there's something else. Is it, are there other materials we could use? And so we were thinking about the transportation challenges, the need for skilled labor, and then the shrinking housing stock. And that's where we really came together and started to envision, what would this look like? What can we do? However, as Natalie said, and access to sustainable building materials. So we were thinking about the different, other types of things. Could we go into communities? Could we use recycled materials? What's already there? What's available? Is it hemp? Is it MGO? Is it something else that we could use? But again, as Natalie said, we really needed to shut up and listen, right? A lot of times universities, I'm doing research, we're at the university and we're coming in with these, we've solutioned this big idea. But we haven't talked to anyone who would actually use it, right? We needed to actually bridge these connections. And so once we got talking, we decided, we really need to take a step back. We're thinking about building materials, we're thinking about creating these solutions, but we haven't talked to anybody who would use these solutions. So we really need to get involved with the community. And that's when we established our From Harvest to House initiative that is funded through the University of Toronto to co-create these housing solutions. And so we're starting off small. We're hoping to make, grow this. So happy to talk about it after. But we started off thinking about, okay, how can we do this? We need to listen to communities. We need to go and be there and listen and understand what's happening. What are the biggest challenges? Sharing knowledge from these lived experiences. We wanted to create these connections and understand, what historically, what has been going on, what are the opportunities that are available there. And then really just putting the community first, putting those needs first and thinking about what makes sense for that community. All the communities that we work with are in Saskatchewan, but that doesn't mean that they're all the same, right? Everyone's community is different, and there's different things that are needed in different places. So this is where we brought together 6 different First Nations communities. So if you would like to.
Within our communities, now, again, a lot of these previous conversations happened through the Community Cares Kitchen and addressing our unhoused, our homeless, our vulnerable through the pandemic. And through those partnerships and connecting with our communities, we had 6 of the 12 communities that make up the Prince Albert Grand Council. Within the Prince Albert Grand Council, we represent, we have oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Thank gosh, there isn't a test on this one. So we have Dene Nations, we have Cree Nations, we also have Lakota Nations within our within the Prince Albert Grand Council. So within the representation of our groups, we had our Dene Nation, which was Hatchet Lake. We had Red Earth Cree Nation, Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, which consists of another 8 communities within Peter Ballantyne, Montreal Lake Cree Nations, Sturgeon Lake, and Wahpeton Dakota Nation. Now, when we were discussing the earlier dialogues, and we were even listening this morning about how many of the houses, lacked water and carrying water back into the houses, well, some of the dialogues that we had within our community, say from like Wahpeton, the history within the last 60 years was that within the last 60 years, some of the counselors that were sitting now remembered that they could have, their families would go out into the trap line, or they would go out into the forest line and get the wood to create the homes that they would now live in in their communities. And hearing these stories about how at one point they were very sustainable based on the environment around them, but over these last 60 years, you've become dependent on the now system that is in place. So these dialogues talk about how to sustainably bring that back to the community. And that's really important in terms of having these dialogues, is actually bringing the focus to the community.
Definitely. So from the beginning, our objectives were really in the short term to have this exchange of knowledge. So working directly with the communities, having these conversations, understanding what is available, what approaches, what technologies are there, what is the capacity, and what are the needs. And then our long-term goal through this project and through these conversations is really to establish strong foundations between industry, government, academia, and the communities themselves. So we've been bringing in different people, different organizations to kind of expand these conversations. And then ultimately, we're looking to co-develop pathways for housing self-sufficiency within these communities. And how do we do that? So we began with different community consultations. So as Natalie mentioned, we're working with 6 communities. And so between December and February, well, throughout August, and then we went in December and February. Let me tell you, it was cold coming from Toronto up in December and February, but it was a good time. It was wonderful. So we had conversations. We went up to Pelican Narrows. We went to Wahpeton Dakota Nation, and to Cumberland House. And so we had individualized conversations with housing managers, people in the community, bringing their concerns and kind of discussing what are the challenges, what are they facing on a one-on-one kind of basis. From there, we have continued. So that was at the beginning of this year. And then throughout this year, we continued for more outreach. Where we have established at different forums, different workshops, and we are working forward together to kind of create this workshop that I will now bring up. So in September, only about a month ago, we had our first workshop, our From Harvest to House gathering. It was in Saskatoon, where members from all 6 of the communities gathered. I think we had maybe about 40 people, I would say, who joined in these conversations. And so here we started with narrative and storytelling, and you may be like, okay, we're talking about housing. How does this come into play? But we really wanted to start with sharing these stories so that we can understand and bridge and make these connections of how are we going to move forward with housing if we don't know the history and we haven't shared that together. So we started off with a question of, what does home mean to you? And then thinking about what are the successes, what are the challenges that have been faced within that community. And so we had this really narrative where people were given a space to hold space, talk to others in different communities, and share their story about what home was. And I think, that was brought up earlier in the opening ceremony about home, and really, what is home? What is home? It's different than a house, really, right? There's a house, but then there's home. So we wanted to think about that. And as Natalie brought up, we heard lots of conversations of, well, we used to come together as a community, and home was really about community and about family and about who's there. So that was kind of where we began. And some of the major themes that we were seeing may not be surprising to you from these conversations. We were seeing barriers in housing. So one quote from someone was, some of the barriers we face for housing: overcrowding. It's a major issue. There's social problems, and it doesn't only affect your personal life at home, but also your education and your mental well-being, right? So all those issues are intertwining. And so that was discussed as well as I'm an engineer thinking about housing, but we also had people in health sciences on our team and social sciences, because we understand that this isn't just a housing issue. It can also be, mental health issue as well, and a well-being. Funding. That was another key theme that came up. Not surprisingly, we need more funding to get more people into houses. And so we discussed a lot of the cyclical relationship of, well, we need to get new housing, but we don't have any funding, but then we need the housing and there's not funding, right? So it was a never ending kind of cycle. And then also, again, thinking about home and family. And I think that was really where we came down to of, we can think about different things of houses, but our home is really family and community. And how are we coming together to address these solutions? And so this one was really moving. This story, what someone said, the first thing that came to mind about housing was their mother. I used to live with my late mom. I looked after her when she moved in with me in 2005, but when she moved out, she passed away. And so home is my mom's love. I want my house to be a loving home for my family. That's what it means to me, my mom's love. So again, a lot of this thinking about how are we building this community and coming together for housing. So we also had an activity what we did of rich pictures. So not only were we sharing narrative stories, but we were also sharing drawings. And a lot of people were, oh, I'm not an artist. And the first rule of rich pictures is you don't have to be an artist. Yep. And this is really about, drawing and just bringing what are the challenges, laying it all out so that we can really understand where are those connections and what are the major themes so that we can move forward for a solution. So in this, we took a couple minutes in our workshop where people were given time to just kind of think about the housing situation, and then take time and really draw using pictures, symbols, words, what the housing situation was to them in their community.
It was really important to note that when we were having these dialogues, having these conversations, which you would consider that within the same tribal council that maybe these dialogues had been had, but we had communities within the 6 that had never shared their common ground and being only an hour apart from each other. And these are communities that have been living and thriving beside each other for, well, time immemorial or greater part of their time in that area. And it was something that having that dialogue and being able to understand in its finite, the understanding of how we lived on the land was so important to have that dialogue, because from the rich pictures and the more important part of not necessarily having to be an artist, it was really about being able to trace pathways in their communities for us to be able to continue walking down those pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really moving actually seeing, these connections being built at this gathering. So these were some of the rich pictures that were drawn. So again, it is kind of small, but if you see anything that resonates with you, I welcome you to take some time, raise your hand if you see anything that is resonating with you from these pictures. But again, we had, lots of pieces of housing, but also electricity usage, right? So that also plays into housing, as well as sewage backup as a big issue. And we saw that often as well. Overcrowding and thinking about different solutions there. This one we really liked. So they brought up, they had mold, right? Mold as being an issue, and bringing in this broken window as kind of the element. It's never getting fixed. We have lots of broken windows. This is now leading to potential fire escapes being blocked because they're boarded up, which could lead to house fires. Mold, if the window's broken, we're getting in more moisture. Having lots of garbage as an issue as well. So there was other issues that were being brought up of not just housing. Also septic, again, was brought up as well here. And then finally, we had our maybe government, someone up in their castle on the hill with all the money, and it's not getting down to the community. And that was kind of a big feeling, right, of funding not making its way into the housing, and having all of these different issues along here. So key themes, as we said, not surprising things that are coming out, but we wanted to make sure that we're having these conversations so that we can move forward. So we found, more funding is needed, new construction and maintenance programs and training programs are needed. Overcrowding leading to this physical as well as emotional wear and tear on homes. Access to materials, and then this really need for diverse and innovative solutions. And so that was kind of where we've come to with these dialogues, and how now we're going to start moving forward together with each of the communities. And so right now we're really compiling all of this information from our workshop. Again, it just happened a month ago. And we're working individually now with the community leaders and thinking about tailored housing frameworks and solutions. So through our resources at the university, that was something that was really important. I think for the team, that we have all these resources at University of Toronto. How can we get them out to the people? How can we actually use them for something that's not just a little science experiment? So we're compiling this information. We're working to create these frameworks and coming up with solutions and what's needed. We also have some political scientists that are involved in this project, and so they were at the workshop as well, hoping to develop some policy briefings and work within that government system to potentially make some changes and move forward. So other next steps. I feel like I missed one. Okay, go ahead.
Actually, so some of the dialogues within our communities, it should be noted, is that we actually have, out of one of the 12 communities, they are no longer building any new housing at all. They have ceased building housing, and they're only maintaining maintenance programs on the basics of those houses. They have over 100 houses that are condemned in their community. There's no funding to be able to replace or even begin to fathom how to repair these 100 houses, plus the others that are deteriorating, plus the impacts of radon gas, plus the impacts of the land sinking, plus the impacts, and a lot of the common grounds that we have from community to community. Not to saying that it's the same stories. There's a lot of common ground in understanding how the houses have these naturally inherited risks that come with when they are constructed. So talking a little bit more on the construction side of things, through this past year and a half of bridging the work between From Harvest to House and our partnership with the University of Toronto and the Toronto Metropolitan University, the ability, say for myself as a social worker, I am a social worker whose background and desire to change the way that we build houses was not going to be quantifiable without the science. And that was why we built these relationships and this partnership and this, actually, I'm going to say, brutal understanding of each other, to the humor, and also understanding the suffering that we've each lived in to get to this point where we can actually stand before you and present, which is, I just want to say it's a privilege to be here to share this knowledge. So through some of our partnerships, we've been working with Jason Sirkin with Solo Architecture. Now, he studied under Douglas Cardinal, and who would, if anything, he would be, I guess, the equivalent of, I don't even know how to describe him. I call him Mecca, because at the end of the day, Douglas Cardinals is an architect here in Canada who has done a lot of the Indigenous builds and a lot of the builds in Saskatchewan, like the First Nations University with the TP. So with touring Pelican Narrows, we were able to see a lot of the question we were saying, what were you doing before? Well, they were using a lot of the natural resources in the area. So we actually were able to tour their new cultural center, which will be opening up just opened up this fall time. Now, through that, we also have to understand, and as we said this morning, housing is not just something that is to be gifted. It is a right. So we do have to acknowledge that through the United Nations Declarations of Rights of Indigenous People, that through Article 23, through these partnerships and through these conversations, this is how we're going to be able to connect the dots to be able to rectify the issues that are affecting our communities. And it isn't through siloing, it's going to be through these conversations. So a little bit more about Rock Tree MGO. So we are all dealing with we're all dealing with drywall and gypsum for the primary in a lot of our houses. Now there's innovation products that are coming through, but in terms of actually dealing with the mold and the inherent problems with drywall and gypsum, there isn't anything that can directly replace this building material. And that is what magnesium oxide is. It is the exact replacement to drywall and gypsum. It's fire resistant, it's mold resistant, it's pest resistant, it's carbon capturing its production, and it's net zero. So when we're discussing about the future and we're looking at how are we going to have these net zero houses, how are we going to have what is being facilitated through Canada as a obligation to our communities to have the houses, the businesses, and everything in compliance to net zero, well, we're not doing anything for our building materials. And we also don't have access to those materials that are going to make us on par moving towards 2030 and 2050. So the opportunity to be able to bring forth this building material to Canada has been a national dialogue, again, from coast to coast, listening to communities again on the issues that are impairing their ability to restore their housing assets, which is supply chain, which is access to innovative building materials that do not have inherent risks for mold and other problems. So as we move forward through the project, we also at this point with the MGO board are actually into testing, and we're actually past testing and research, and we're actually now into what would be considered startup phase. So through the University of Toronto and the Toronto Metropolitan University, through the access of their environmental labs, something that I can't do in my garage, I wouldn't be able to even be able to have the foundation to be able to have the science of this. We now are doing the science, which is the mold tests. We're going to develop the Canadian formula using Canadian minerals and Canadian forestry byproducts to be able to construct and create this building material. So in order for us to be able to have that collaboration, again, we needed the science. And so I think that in terms of where we are going with our project, and I wouldn't want to even say it's a project, this is a way of living in terms of having this dialogue and moving forward. And we talk about the 7 generations and how even these dialogues are going to turn into housing. They will turn into housing. We can change the way that we build housing. We can. We just need to have more conversations, and to extend those conversations, for my sake, would be with the universities to be able to turn that into actually actionables. So keep these dialogues.
Yeah. And so one other actionable item that we're working that came out of those conversations was the need for some kind of maintenance manual for new people who are moving into a new home or have been living there for a while. We heard a lot of, there's no maintenance book. People don't know what to do or have lots of questions. And so we were actually working with Engineers Without Borders and Wahpeton Dakota Nation, as this was kind of their initial initiative, to create a smartphone app. So Wahpeton actually has a language app, a phone app that has been extremely successful and lots of uptake by the community. So we thought together maybe we can make an actual housing maintenance app that can just be accessed, and it can be specific for the community. We're starting with Wahpeton, and ideally this will be an initial outcome from these conversations. And again, as we were saying, we're really working to co-develop and work with these communities as a starting point, and then hopefully bring it to more communities so that we can establish these success stories. Yeah.
The importance of the app is through the dialogues, some questions where some of our people don't know how to change a light bulb, or they feel hindered to approach the band office if a faucet is leaking. And we need to normalize asking even for help on some of these issues in regards to changing a light bulb, to changing the faucets, to housing maintenance in terms of even clearing your emergency exits for snow in the wintertime and such like that. These were a part of the dialogue for this app, is just being able to administer something on a very short informational, but to connect the community through this dialogue.
Yeah. All right. And I think with that, thank you so much for listening. And if you have questions, I don't know how much time we have for any questions. We have about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you have questions, happy to take them. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
So interested about the testing.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested about the testing, right? I guess the current common response to when a community is asking for testing is, well, there's more money, there's going to be a finite amount of money, so
Yeah.
just go straight into remediation and,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So if there's anything new,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear that.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, so this is like, so you're saying like mold testing in housing is what kind of
Radon
gas as well.
Like just basically.
Oh, I was like thinking about like Stachybotrys or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that's the Stachybotrys is black mold, or what you would typically think of as black mold. Though I will note, not all mold that is the color black is the really harmful Stachybotrys one. So that is something to remember. But there have been some advances recently, and I'm hoping that those will get more widely available. So something that my team has been looking into is potentially using smartphones again, maybe as a way with an additional, say, badge or something that can detect mold that you leave in your house, color changing. And if it changes colors, you would let you know if there's mold or not. That's something that we're slowly working on and would be fairly low cost to kind of detect. And so if the concern is a very specific mold, like you said, like Stachybotrys, if there's a really specific one, there is potential technology that could be available to use to do that. But it's still in very early development phases. But I know that there are some groups, but this is the issue, right? Is that the people at the university are like, oh, we made all these advances and then it's not getting out. Like there are advances, they're just not getting out to the people that need to use them, which is what we're trying to limit. We're trying to bridge that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, when I think of Stachybotrys, it's usually somebody's already been went to the hospital and they're seeing symptoms and we're trying to find out where they're getting it, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely. And I would say, I think there is also a level of, there's only so much remediation that can be done when you're like, you need to just completely tear out the walls. And I know that that's also an issue because there aren't the materials to do so. But that was a lot of my work previously that I was looking into of, if we're getting to a point where there's so much water damage, it's going to come back. The mold's going to come back unless it's completely replaced, which definitely isn't something that people want to hear because it is really expensive to completely replace. Yeah, I see a question back there.
What's the product source from the country?
Oh, the magnesium oxide?
Oh, yes.
It's Canada. So
Well,
go ahead.
Actually, so the material itself, magnesium oxide board has been used, well, actually the Great Wall of China. So this is a building material that has been used for over 2,000 years. Now, right now, magnesium oxide is utilized in Canada usually as fire barrier in the larger centers and has been put through the Canadian construction material certification twice for the exterior cladding of buildings. Now, a part of what we're working on is actually the tech guide for the interior application of the magnesium oxide board. And from there, the Canadian patent and also the Canadian production facility. So right now, the productions are primarily in China, and you're looking at a luxury tariff of between 17 to 23% increased cost on that building material. So with a Canadian production facility, you're reducing it by that same amount and actually a little bit more through the mining of our natural precious resources through the mountains. So the building material pre-2018, when I did my first application and failed miserably for this building material, that point I was actually importing all of it from China. And then 2018, our mine opened in Canada, and now everything is a Canadian-based material.
And I want to note with that MGO, so that is something where we are doing the testing in-house at the universities, because we don't, we've discussed MGO currently as is, has all these very exciting properties, potentially mold resistant, fire resistant, but we do want to make sure that before anything is brought to a community or used in housing, it needs to have, very stringent testing. So we are doing that all at the universities, looking at, how do we develop this formula that will work for Canada and work for the climate. And so that's really critical. We would never want to bring anything in that was not sufficiently
without the certification
yeah.
through Canadian Construction Materials Council. And the part that in terms of the testing, so the image that we were showing was actually samples from around the world. And there are different components of magnesium oxide board that have a different additive. One's a sulfate and one is a chlorate, and they both perform differently. And so what we're looking at is the specifics of what the makeup of the material is, how it performs in the environmental labs through the university, and then taking those strengths and then combining that into creating the Canadian formula. But I will be here for the next, you'll see me floating around. So if you have more questions in regards to that, please come and chat with me. I do want to share a little bit more or a whole lot more about what we're going to do here. We will be changing the way that we build houses in Canada. We will be.
Yeah.
So I notice it says in the description that the outcome of I don't know if it's just the workshop you're talking about or the overall project is to look at a housing framework strategy. I'm just wondering about what is the scope? Do you, just based on what you're hearing already, what do you see as the scope of that strategy, what it might encompass?
Yeah.
So with our communities right now within the Prince Albert Grand Council, I wouldn't deem it as square one. I would deem it as the opportunity we're actually seeing where a lot of the deficits are and turning that into the foundation of asking the right questions to create solutions. So some of the communities that I've traveled to across Canada are paces ahead in regards to actually getting into solutioning these burdens within the community. So where we are right now is actually listing what the concerns are. And when you can list the concerns, that's how we're going to be able to trace out those pathways. And that came through the consultation from our communities in regards of what they're, in terms of looking at this as a vehicle, where they're wanting to drive this.
Yeah, and I would also say connecting them with the proper channels. And who else can we bring in? That's also, I think the scope is fairly large right now. It's small with the communities that we're working with, but we're hoping if we can start there and create those frameworks that work for these communities, that can be adapted for others as well, and bringing in others who can provide expertise and, move forward in that sense.
And is this a process that maybe can be
absolutely. That is the hope. That's the hope. That's where we're starting. We're starting a smaller, and the hope is that this would be replicated again. That we can, and the workshops that we're hosting could be hosted with other communities, and the frameworks that are coming out of these workshops as we go through the solutioning could be adapted. I think that's really what we're looking at. On many different levels. I actually traveled to the Philippines in the summer, and it was so shocking, really interesting how many similar issues in the Philippines, where it's so, hot and a different climate and all these very similar issues occurring there as here in the north in Canada in these cold climates. So I think there's many different avenues that this could be could go, and other communities elsewhere across the globe could use this framework as kind of the global idea at this point of how can we all work together to solution these really large problems.
Also noting that with the primary partnerships are the University of Toronto and the Toronto Metropolitan University. And having the opportunity today to speak here in Thunder Bay for the communities here, this isn't something that is going to be out of your reach. These are actually dialogues. You'll have access to conversing with us. And in ideal, we're only a stone's throw away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can chat later. I think this is being recorded in our emails. I'm not sure if they're in the manual. We had them up on the presentation, but happy to hand out cards if you want to connect. And we're really hoping to grow this. This is just the beginning, and we're not doing one thing and then we're okay, bye. We're really trying to move forward, and
to bridge this.
it's going to be a longer, it's a longer conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I'll be the bad guy and say time's up.
Ding, 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 ding.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Natalie.
Thank you.
Again, if you do have any questions, Sarah does have to head back to Toronto this evening, but I'm here for the next 3 days, so you'll see me floating about. So if you have any questions in regards to connecting this project to the community, I wouldn't even say it's a project. It really is a dialogue and a way of being. Flag me down. And if you have any questions about MGO board and how we're going to change housing in Canada, again, trip me and I'll be here. So if not, the presentations will be available through the First Nations Housing Conference, and you'll be able to follow us up through there as well.